The folder was labeled Relocation Final. Claire hadn't been looking for it. She'd opened Daniel's laptop to check the printer settings. The nursery needed one more paint reference, and her own device had died overnight. But there it was, right on the desktop. She clicked it open. Flight itineraries. Singapore, then Zurich. Departing in 3 weeks. A foreign account summary with a balance she didn't recognize. A lease agreement under a name she'd never seen. All of it dated. All of it real. All of it modified that morning, while she was asleep down the hall. She was 8 months pregnant. Bare feet on the kitchen floorboards of their Mosman Park home, the ceiling fan turning slowly above her. The yellow nursery door opened behind her. This was the man who painted that nursery himself. Who'd fixed the crib mobile twice because it sat crooked the first time. Who'd turned away from her, quietly, when they heard the heartbeat at 12 weeks. That's the part that made it hard to breathe. Her hands went still on the keyboard. One hand moved to her stomach. She stood there without moving. She didn't scream. She didn't call anyone. She just stood there and waited for an explanation she already knew wasn't coming. To understand why that folder destroyed everything, we need to go back 14 months. Claire closed the laptop. Not quickly, not with panic. She lowered the screen slowly, the way you close something you're not supposed to have seen. Careful, deliberate, like the act of closing it might undo the last 4 minutes. She moved to the kitchen table and sat down, both hands flat on the surface, breathing measured. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't call Nadia. She didn't do anything except sit in the quiet of a house that suddenly felt like someone else's. Outside, a neighbor's sprinkler ticked across the footpath. A car moved slowly down the street. Mosman Park on a Tuesday morning. Unhurried, ordinary. Completely indifferent. Inside, Claire was doing the thing she'd always done under pressure. She was holding it together. She was being rational. She was giving him the benefit of the doubt before she gave herself permission to fall apart. He's a financial planner. He works with client portfolios, international accounts, restructures. There's an explanation. She repeated it until it almost sounded true. But the departure date sat in her chest like a stone. 3 weeks. Her due date was in 4, and the lease agreement, 12 months, fully signed, had a start date she kept returning to, a date she recognized. It was the same week she told him about the baby. She sat at that table for a long time, one hand on the surface, one hand on her stomach, and she didn't let herself cry. Not yet. 9 years is a long time to know someone. Claire and Daniel had met at a work function in Fremantle. Her firm, his client. He'd spent 40 minutes talking to her about architecture before he asked for her number. She remembered thinking he was the first man who'd ever asked what she was working on before asking where she lived. They'd taken their time, moved in together after 2 years, married quietly in Margaret River. 22 people, no fuss. Built the Mosman Park house from a bare block over 18 months. She designed it. He financed it. They joked that between them, they covered every angle. And the baby had been his idea first. She was the one who'd hesitated. Timing, projects, the practice she was still building. He was the one who'd sat across from her at dinner one night and said, quietly, that he was ready whenever she was. That there was no version of his life that didn't have a family in it. 6 months into the pregnancy, he'd surprised her with a renovation. New kitchen, new deck, new floors throughout. She'd walked in blindfolded and cried when she saw it. He'd called it an investment in their future. She believed him completely. That was the thing about Daniel. He never gave her a reason not to. He was consistent, patient, present, the kind of man you stopped waiting to disappoint you, because he never did, which was exactly why the folder made no sense at all. It had happened 3 months ago. Claire had been reviewing their joint account routine, the way she always did on the first of the month, a habit from before they merged finances. Old discipline she never dropped. The transfer stood out immediately. $4,000, labeled consulting, external, drawn from the joint account on a Thursday afternoon. She hadn't seen it go through, hadn't been asked. She brought it up that evening, casually, over dinner. She wasn't accusatory. She was genuinely curious. 4,000 wasn't nothing, but it wasn't alarming either, not on its own. Daniel hadn't even looked up from his plate. He told her it was a client retainer, a new restructure he was managing. Offshore components required a third-party consultant to keep it clean. Standard practice. He'd forgotten to mention it. She'd nodded, made a note to herself to track it if it recurred. It didn't recur, not under that label. She'd filed it away and moved on. There was a nursery to finish, a parental leave plan to finalize, a practice handover to manage before she stepped back. Life was full. She wasn't looking for problems, but sitting at the kitchen table now, hands flat, laptop closed, the folder still open in her mind. That $4,000 came back to her. Quietly, insistently. It wasn't the amount. It was the fact that he hadn't hesitated, not even for a second. ACT-5 gaslighting Beejans. Daniel came home at 6:15. Claire had spent the afternoon deciding how to do this. Not confrontation, not yet. She didn't have enough. She needed to watch his face. She needed to hear the explanation before she decided what it meant. She kept dinner simple, kept her voice even. She told him she'd borrowed his laptop earlier, printer settings, and that she'd accidentally opened a folder on the desktop. Relocation. Final. She described what she'd seen, calmly, one detail at a time. He listened without interrupting. Then he laughed, not loud, not cruel. Just a short, tired exhale through the nose. The laugh of a man who'd come home after a long day to find his pregnant wife had worked herself into a state over nothing. He told her it was a client file, confidential restructure, international assets, staged relocation of holdings. Nothing unusual for his work. He said he'd been meaning to move it to the office server and hadn't gotten around to it. Then his expression shifted. He asked her why she'd been going through his files. Not aggressively, gently, the way you'd ask a child who'd wandered somewhere they shouldn't. And before she could answer, he told her, quietly, carefully, that she'd been struggling lately, that the third trimester was hard, that anxiety was normal this close to the due date, that he was worried about her. She heard herself apologize. She didn't plan to. It just came out. He kissed her on the forehead and asked what she wanted for dinner. And the subject was closed. She couldn't sleep. Daniel was out by 10. Deep, even breathing, completely undisturbed. Claire lay beside him in the dark and stared at the ceiling until the fan above her became just a shape, and the shape stopped meaning anything. At midnight, she got up. She moved quietly to the study, sat down at her own laptop this time, opened the home loan portal with the kind of stillness that comes when you already know what you're about to find. The redraw facility was empty. $180,000, the full available balance, drawn down across 9 transactions over 14 months. The most recent withdrawal was 11 days ago. Her name was on the account. Her signature was supposedly on the authorization. She had never signed anything. She sat with that for a moment. Then she opened her personal banking app, the account her mother had left her, the one she hadn't touched in 2 years because she couldn't bring herself to spend it, because spending it meant accepting that her mother was really gone. Balance, $312. It should have been $67,000. The room didn't spin. There was no dramatic moment, just a woman sitting alone in a dark study in Mosman Park at midnight, 8 months pregnant, watching the screen until the numbers stopped looking like numbers. She didn't wake Daniel. She closed every tab, went back to bed, lay down beside him, and said absolutely nothing. because now she knew she needed proof he couldn't explain away. She sat in the nursery the next morning, not for any particular reason. She'd come in to check the mobile. One of the hooks had been loose, and then she just stayed, stayed, lowered herself into the rocking chair Daniel had ordered online and assembled on a Sunday afternoon, with instructions he kept reading upside down. The room was everything she'd wanted: pale yellow walls, white timber shelving, a crib positioned to catch the morning light through the east window. She'd calculated that herself, the angle and the hour. A mobile above it, little wooden birds. Daniel had hung it crooked the first time, fixed it, declared it perfect. She'd told him it was still slightly off. He'd told her she was an architect and therefore constitutionally unable to accept close enough. She'd laughed. She remembered laughing. Now she sat in that room and held what she knew against what she believed. And the two things didn't fit together anymore, no matter how she arranged them. She almost called Nadia. She picked up her phone, put it back down, picked it up again, because here was the thing she kept circling, the thought she couldn't shake loose. If she was wrong. But, if there was an explanation she hadn't considered, she would have said something that couldn't be unsaid. She would have cracked the foundation of the one relationship she'd built her entire life around. And she was 8 months pregnant. This was not the time to be wrong. So she put the phone down, sat in the rocking chair, let the morning light move across the yellow walls, and decided she needed one more thing before she trusted her own instincts. The email arrived at 11:47 on a Wednesday morning. Claire was at the kitchen bench with a glass of water and a list of questions she'd been quietly drafting for her solicitor. Not sent yet, not even finished. Just thoughts, just the beginning of something she wasn't ready to name. The subject line read, "You need to look at this." No sender name. A string of random characters where an address should have been. She almost deleted it. Her hand hovered over the trackpad for a full 3 seconds. She opened it. One line, a BSB number and an account reference. Nothing else. No explanation. No signature. No indication of who had sent it or why. She stared at it for a long time. Then she ran the BSB. It took 4 minutes to find. A private account, registered through a secondary financial institution, not the one she and Daniel used, not the one his practice operated through. A separate structure entirely. The account name was D. Hartley Cross. She read it 3 times. Daniel's middle name was Cross. She'd known that. It was on their marriage certificate. On his passport. She'd never heard him use it. Not once in 9 years. It wasn't a name he went by. It wasn't the name she'd ever seen attached to anything financial. Until now. She wrote the account details on the piece of paper, folded it once, put it inside the cover of the notebook she kept in her bag, the one Daniel never touched. Then she sat very still. Someone else knew, and they wanted her to find it. She didn't go to Daniel's bank. She went to hers. Claire had learned enough in 14 years of running her own practice to know that the first rule of any investigation was to control what the other person knew about it. Daniel couldn't find out she was looking. Not yet. Not until she had everything. She requested a private appointment, told the branch manager she was conducting a routine account review ahead of maternity leave. Kept her voice steady. Kept her questions specific. What she learned took 11 minutes to confirm. 6 separate withdrawals from her personal inheritance account. Each one processed across a 14-month window. Each one structured deliberately, carefully, just under the threshold that triggers an automatic fraud review. Whoever had done it knew exactly where the line was. Her signature was on every authorization form. She asked to see copies. The branch manager slid them across the desk with the careful expression of someone who understood more than they were saying. Claire looked at her own signature. Clean, consistent, perfectly formed, and felt something cold move through her chest. She had never signed a single one. She photographed every document on her phone before she left. That afternoon, while Daniel was at the office, she moved through his study methodically. She didn't disturb anything, didn't shift a single paper out of place. She photographed the desk, the filing cabinet, the folders arranged by year along the bottom shelf, and then, in the back of the top drawer, beneath the folded insurance document, she found it. A burner phone. Black. Switched off. She put it back exactly where it was and walked out of that room knowing she had enough to make a call. Daniel came home 2 hours early. Flowers, native Australian stems, the kind she actually liked. Not the generic service station roses he used to bring in their first year. A paper bag from the Italian place in Cotascloe. Dinner sorted. No need to cook. He said he'd been thinking about her all day. He was warm in a way that was hard to dismiss. They ate at the kitchen table, candles, his idea. He talked about the birth plan, asked questions she hadn't expected him to remember. He brought up names again. 2. He'd been turning over quietly, he said. Hadn't wanted to push. Just wanted her to know he'd been thinking. For 90 minutes, she almost let herself believe it. Almost convinced herself that the account discrepancies had an explanation she hadn't found yet. That the burner phone was work-related. Some clients operated outside normal channels, she knew that. That the folder, the account, the lease, all of it had a version that made sense. He was right here. He was present. He was the man she'd married. She cleared the plates while he showered. His regular phone was on the kitchen bench, face up. She wasn't going to look. She'd already decided she wasn't going to look. Then it lit up. A message from Marcus Webb. 4 words and a full stop. Everything's on track. 3 weeks. She put the phone back exactly as she'd found it. Faced the same direction, same angle. She finished clearing the table, folded the paper bag, blew out the candles. By the time Daniel came back downstairs, the warmth had gone completely out of the room. She traced the account the following morning. It took her 3 hours and 2 phone calls she made from her car, parked 2 streets away from the house, engine running, voice calm. She used a contact from her practice, someone who understood property title searches and asked no unnecessary questions. The account registered to D. Hartley Cross was tied to a residential lease, Fremantle, a converted terrace on a quiet street 4 kilometers from the water. 12-month agreement, signed 9 months ago. She checked her phone calendar, scrolled back, found the date she'd circled in pale blue. The evening she told Daniel she was pregnant. The dinner she planned. The card she'd hidden in his jacket pocket. The lease was signed 4 days later. She drove there. She didn't plan to. She told herself she was just confirming the address, just making sure it was real. But her hands took her there anyway, down through Fremantle, left off the main road, slow along a terrace-lined street she'd never had reason to visit. She pulled up across the road and cut the engine. 2 names on the buzzer beside the front door. She was too far to read them clearly, but the driveway, the narrow strip of exposed aggregate beside the front fence, held a car she recognized immediately. Daniel's car. His actual car. The one she'd watched him reverse out of their driveway that morning. She sat there without moving. 1 minute. Then 5. Then 11. There were lights on inside, and they weren't his. She called the solicitor the next morning. A firm in the Perth CBD, someone Nadia had used 2 years earlier for a property dispute. Claire had saved the number then without knowing why. She knew why now. She laid everything on the table. The folder, the account, the lease, the forged signatures, the burner phone, the message from Marcus Webb. She spoke without stopping for 22 minutes. Her voice didn't break once. The solicitor listened, made notes, asked 3 precise questions. Then she looked up from her notepad and told Claire, carefully, clearly, that the withdrawals from the inheritance account hadn't just been unauthorized. They'd required a forged signature, a deliberate document-level forgery on a protected personal account. That wasn't a civil matter. That wasn't a financial misunderstanding between spouses. That was fraud. Claire drove back to Mosman Park alone. She sat in the car park of a shopping center on Sterling Highway and opened her phone. Pulled up the lease agreement she'd photographed. Expanded the co-signatory field she'd been avoiding. A name. A woman's name. First and last. Simone. She sat with that name for a long time. 14 months. That's how long it had been running. The inheritance her mother had spent 40 years saving. The home equity they built together across 9 years. The baby fund. The account they'd opened together at 20 weeks. Laughing about how small the first deposit was. All of it. Moved. Piece by piece. While she painted the nursery and packed the hospital bag and believed, completely, genuinely believed, that she was building something real. Her hands were shaking against the steering wheel. She didn't notice until she tried to start the car and couldn't remember how. She told Nadia that night. She hadn't planned to do it the way it happened. She'd called asking if she could come over, just for an hour, just to sit somewhere that wasn't her own house. Nadia had said yes before she'd finished the sentence. She held it together through the financial details. She held it together through the Fremantle apartment, through the forged signatures, through the lease agreement and the co-signatory and the name she now couldn't stop seeing. Every time she closed her eyes, she held it together through all of it. Then Nadia asked, quietly, carefully, how she was feeling. Not about the money, not about the fraud, just how she was feeling. And something in Claire's chest came apart. She talked about the nursery, the yellow walls he'd chosen, not her, him. The crib he'd assembled on a Sunday with upside-down instructions. The mobile he'd fixed twice. The renovation he'd called an investment in their future, while he was already moving their future somewhere else entirely. She asked Nadia if any of it had been real. Any of it at all. Nadia didn't answer immediately. She reached across and held Claire's hand and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound hollow. And Claire understood that. She wasn't really asking Nadia. She was asking herself. 9 years. She'd given 9 years to a version of Daniel Hartley that apparently didn't exist outside of what she needed him to be. And now she was sitting on a friend's couch in Mosman Park, 8 months pregnant, 3 weeks from her due date, trying to locate the exact moment she'd stopped seeing clearly. She couldn't find it. That was the part that frightened her most. The injunction was filed on a Thursday morning. Claire's solicitor moved quickly and precisely, freezing every remaining joint asset before Daniel had any indication something was coming. The home loan account, the joint savings, 2 investment portfolios he'd apparently forgotten to clean out. All of it locked, pending investigation. Claire was at Nadia's when it was served. She didn't watch it happen. She didn't need to. Her solicitor called at 2:30 and told her it had been executed without incident. Daniel had been at his Subiaco office. He'd accepted the documents without a word. He arrived at the Mosman Park house at 4. Claire was there by then. She'd wanted to be. She stood in the kitchen, steady, silent, while a locksmith finished changing the front door. Daniel stood on the porch with the legal notice in his hand and said nothing for a long moment. Then he told her he'd been planning to handle it properly. That was all he offered. Not a denial, not an apology, not a single word about the baby. Just that quiet, careful sentence. The same composure he'd used every time he'd closed down a conversation she tried to start. She didn't respond. He left without looking at the nursery. 3 days later, Claire's solicitor received an unexpected call. Marcus Webb, Daniel's business partner, had contacted the Australian Federal Police voluntarily. He'd been running a parallel skimming structure to the same offshore accounts. Cooperating fully was his best option now. Daniel's entire financial architecture, every transfer, every account, every forged document, was about to land on a federal investigator's desk. Daniel Hartley hadn't just lost the house. He'd lost the only person who might have protected him. The message arrived on a Sunday morning, 14 days before her due date. Claire was at the kitchen bench, same spot where she'd found the folders 6 weeks earlier, with a cup of tea she kept forgetting to drink. The house was quiet. The nursery door was open behind her, morning light across the yellow walls. Her personal email, unknown sender, same randomized address as the first one. She opened it without hesitating this time. 3 attachments. A signed statutory declaration. A time-stamped record of every transfer made through the D. Hartley Cross account. Dates, amounts, destinations, all of it ordered and clear. And a single handwritten line, photographed on plain white paper. No letterhead, no name. I didn't know about the baby. I'm sorry. Claire sat with that for a long time. Simone had been the first email, the BSB number, the account reference. She'd been the one who'd opened the door. And then, when she found out about the pregnancy, she'd walked away from Daniel entirely, taken the evidence with her, packaged it carefully, sent it to a woman she'd never met, and asked for nothing in return. No explanation beyond that one line. No request for contact. No attempt to justify or defend or be understood. Just, sorry. Daniel pleaded guilty in the Perth Magistrates Court 6 weeks later. 3 counts of fraud. The Mosman Park house remained in Claire's name. A significant portion of her mother's inheritance was recovered through the asset freeze. The AFP investigation into Marcus Webb ran separately and wider. Claire didn't attend the hearing. She was otherwise occupied. Her daughter arrived on a Tuesday morning at 6:42, 7 pounds exactly, a full head of dark hair, and an expression of profound displeasure at the inconvenience of being born. Claire named her alone. The way she intended to do everything from here. She never found out Simone's last name. She never needed to.